Origen of Alexandria, who was one of the ecclesiastic church fathers, okay, not a Muslim.
Origin,
Yeah. He said that how could any man of intelligence believe that there could be a day and the night without the sun and the moon, which were created afterwards? In fact, in Genesis, so this is Genesis chapter 1, verse 9, or verse 11. And then if you look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 5, it states that no plant has sprung up yet. So on the third day, you have plants and vegetation being created. But in Genesis chapter 2, verse 5, you had no plant has sprung up yet. So you have internal contradictions and of course external ones as well.
Is this in the Old Testament? Or?
Yeah, Old Testament. But the same thing can be said of the New Testament. There's all kinds of contradictions. There, look at the crucifixion story. How many witnesses there were at the tomb? Was it 2? Was it 3? I mean, we can go on and on and on. But contradictions are a good way to sieve out, you know, these supposed revelations which claim to be from the Word of God, or the Word of God in its entirety. The idea of the biblical inerrancy, therefore, is falsified. So we say that, number one, it has to be preserved so it can be as accessible to us as it is to a primary audience. It also has to be have no contradictions, because that's a necessary condition for something to be true. But also there are other things. So for example, one of these things, and it's very interesting because in the Old Testament it says that one of the signs of prophethood is that the prophet would, when he speaks of an oracle or some kind of prophecy, it will come true. This is Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 21. And you'll find that when the Prophet Muhammad, he speaks about the future events, things that are going to happen in the future, that it materializes as is. In fact, the Quran, it makes a very bold claim that in 3 to 9 years, in chapter 30, verse 1 to 6, that the Romans will have been defeated, and in 3 to 9 years that they will defeat the Persians in a nearby lowland. And there's so much confidence that has come into that prediction, وَعْدَ اللَّهِ لَا يُخْلِفُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَ, that this is the promise of God, and that God will not, go against His promise. We have evidences not just from the Muslim sources, but the Chronicles of Theophanes, which is a Roman source, states that exactly what the Quran predicted would happen materialized as the Quran stated, which means that when the Roman Empire was at the brink of collapse, that it was able to come back, rise up from the ashes and defeat the Persian Empire. And so this could have gone awfully wrong. This prediction could have gone awfully wrong, and therefore we could have been able to disqualify the Quran from being the word of God. But it didn't. And this is just one of a plethora of examples of predictions that the Quran and the Sunnah, or the Hadith of the Prophet, which materialized in the way that they did.
So do you have any question?
No.
Oh, because I obviously come from a sort of Christian background as well. I was sort of Catholic, but was educated by Jehovah's Witnesses, so it's a bit of a jumble there. But to me, why Islam made so much, I said this and I came to this realization, I'm not 31 years old. The only reason why I am Muslim, not one, but one of the main reasons why I'm Muslim is because of the education that I've experienced with the Christianity. Christianity almost set me up to become a Muslim. Because of, if you sift through all the nitty-gritty and you look at sort of like the grant narrative as opposed to the meta-narrative, the grant narrative, like the main narrative of like what prophets talk about and what they experience, you will find I personally find a fine line of consistency. And the prophet basically, and this is in the Quran, the prophet steps into a tradition, a long-lasting tradition that came way before him. And I feel like for me, the biggest evidence for prophets is the will of resistance that they play in a given time. Because the majority of prophets usually face opposition. And they sort of in a meta way outlive the opposition and impact the world in a way where there's really literally levels to this, how much impact, for example, the English language is extremely impactful, but the French language is also very impactful in the sense that a lot of the Western and the American things that we do in the culture comes from that very place. And I feel like that is a testament to that, on how much, because the Quran itself is there supposed to win the hearts of the people. So it's a very immaterial thing. And then it lives out.
But this is a good point about the Quran. Actually, this is something the Quran continuously says, that Abraham was not Yahudiyan or Nasrani. He was not a Jew or a Christian. Yeah. Because have you read the Quran? Have you read some of them? Yeah. So this is one of the things you may have come across, right? Because he couldn't have been. I mean, Judah was one of his grandchildren, and obviously Christ was someone who came after him. He didn't know who he was, and there's no evidence that he knew who he was, right, in the Old Testament. So what the Quran states is that he was Hanifan Muslima. He was upright and submissive. And this is what we are calling to. We are calling to submission to God. So what do you think so far about this?
About everything.
About what I've just said. Is it conceivable to you that Islam can be true?
Yeah, of course. But I just don't have enough like evidence. That's my thing.
Okay.
Like I also had problems with Christianity because I was like, some things just didn't make sense to me, and it wasn't like clear. Like there was some like ambiguity about it.
Yeah.
And I know that in Islam, like my friends are very like certain about what they know. Like they kind of know it very well.
Yeah.
But I don't know it very well.
Right.
Just quickly.
Yeah, of course.
So, sorry. Just to add this before I forget. So you know what happened with me was that obviously I had a journey through Islam, right? And strangely enough, the more I sort of delved into Islam, the things that matter in Christianity, my appreciation for that rose, you know? But I was really able to look at it and be like, okay, this must have been from God as well, but then this is so strange. So for example, I engaged with the Gospel of John very intensively in a couple last months. And it's hard for me to believe that you actually can take that gospel and say, Jesus came to be God. So things like that, because I delved into Islam, it made it much more easier for me to embrace aspects of Christianity and appreciate it, I feel like the way it should have been appreciated. Just like when the blind man says, he is a prophet. I also say that Jesus is a prophet, and nothing more. He didn't say he's God, he said he's a prophet when he was asked by the Pharisees.
That's a good point. But going back to the point of evidence, right? So I've given you one example of a prediction. That's just one of many. I'll give you a few others just to give you kind of a taste of this, right? So the Prophet Muhammad, he made a series of predictions of the future. One of those unusual predictions that came true is that the barefooted Arabs are going to yatatawaluna fil bunyan. They're going to race to see who builds the highest constructions. Now you're seeing this materialize once again in Saudi Arabia. You're seeing it materialize in UAE. The tallest building in the world is in the UAE. Now this, in order for that to have happened, you needed to have economic conditions for that to have happened. The oil that they found in the 30s, whatever it was. Now, once again, we're seeing that happen. The Prophet even predicted things which we are seeing today in the economy. For example, he said that there will come a time where interest, like bank interest, will be so widespread that whoever does not consume it, مَنْ لَمْ يَأْكُلْهُ أَصَابَتْهُ مِنْ غُبَارٍ or أَصَابَهُ مِنْ غُبَارٍ, that whoever does not consume it himself, they will not be able to get away from its dust. In other words, it will be something that will affect everyone. The Prophet even said this. He said that sexual promiscuity will be so widespread that there will be diseases or sexually transmitted diseases that were never there in the first place. So the invention or the advent of new not just that there will be a proliferation of sexually transmitted diseases, but the advent of new sexually transmitted diseases. These are things we are seeing today. Like these are trends we are seeing today. That is aside the fact that the Prophet predicted exactly where Islam will spread. He said, Zuwiya li al-ard, that the earth has been made projected in front of me. فَرَأَيْتُ مَشَارِقَهَا وَمَغَارِبَهَا. So I saw its east parts and its west parts. وَإِنَّ أُمَّتِي سَيَبْلُغُ مُلْكَهَا, that my people will possess these areas, مَا زُوِيَ لِي مِنْهَا, what has been projected for me about it. And so he mentions the exact countries. He mentions in other places that Islam will spread to the land of Egypt, Yemen, the Levant. He even mentions the Sindh wal Hind, that there will be expeditions in India, and that there will be in Pakistan, modern day Pakistan. This is we would say this is too detailed for someone who is an illiterate man in the desert to be able to predict. And it's so clearly the case that even people like Barnaby Rogerson, who is a historian, he said the fact that Islam spread the way it did is like the Eskimos taking over Russia and America. It's something you couldn't imagine. I was reading a book called, I think, A Brief History of the World or something, a long time ago. I'm not sure if you've read it or seen it. It's quite a popular book. It's by Gombrich, G.E. Gombrich or something like that. When I was reading the chapter on Islam, because he gives you like a history of the world, as it says on a tin. And he went to the chapter of Islam and he was saying that the fact that Islam spread the way it did is the most astonishing thing I'm going to mention in this book, or something to that effect. And he says that if it wasn't for Charlemagne, which was one particular military leader in France at that time, we would be speaking Arabic right now. Basically, right? In England, we would be speaking Arabic right now. How it spread, which is usually used as an argument against Islam, or Islam was spread against with a sword or whatever, which is not the case, because this was a realist international relations framework. Everyone was fighting everyone. The Roman Empire was trying to expand, the Persian. But how Islam spread was, and how it did so with exactly the same way the Prophet said it would, in his most...
How did he say it would?
So he said it would go eastward and westward.
At the same time?
Yeah, زوي لي الأرض فرأيت مشارقها. I saw its east parts. He didn't say south. He didn't say شمالها وغربها وجنوبها. How do you know this?
I speak Arabic.
Oh, mashallah.
Yeah.
What the hell? What's going on here? وجنوبها.
You know it.
Yeah. All right. No, but for the people, no. Yeah. Where are you from originally?
Liverpool, England.
Well, how come you speak Arabic?
Because I got Arabic friends and I study Arabic as well.
Oh, is it? Yeah, he didn't say جنوبها وشمالها. So you come in and tell me, you know? I didn't expect that, I have to say. All right? He didn't say that. He says مشارقها ومغاربها. وإن أمتي سيبلغ ملكها ما زوي لي منها. So he said that. And he also mentioned, like for example, right? There was a time where there was a battle called Khandaq. And or the Battle of Ahzab. And this particular battle, the Muslims were in a situation of weakness. They were in a situation of weakness. And there's a hadith that states that there was a sakhra. What does that mean?
Rock?
Yeah. So now we're doing the Arabic lesson. So there was a rock, yeah, and the Prophet hit it one time, and he says, Futiha Faris, that Rome has been conquered, meaning that we are going to conquer Rome. And then he hit it again. The Persian Empire has been Faris, yeah? And then he hit it again. And then he said, Futiha Sham, yeah? So the Levant has been conquered. And then, is it Rome? Yeah, which was part of the Roman Empire at that time, right? And then he hit it again, and he said, Futiha al-Yemen, which is Yemen at that time, right? He was in a situation of weakness. Like these guys had a very small area of land that they were in control of. They were being sieged by everybody, you know. The Prophet was so hungry that he had to tie a rock to his belly to try and trick his body into thinking there was something there. And these guys were in the desperation, like the height of desperation. And this time, he said Islam is going to spread to these areas, which are the most. It's like, once again, going to Barnaby Rogerson's example. It's like the Eskimos conquering Russia and America. You know, it's like that. So this in itself is an astonishing fact that historians cannot deny, and that they cannot ignore.
But didn't it spread by invasion?
Yes, it did. Yes, it spread through.
Why is that so astonishing?
No, because if you think about the capability of the Muslims at the time, how many were the Muslims? How many were the Persians and the Romans? It's astonishing because the Roman Empire, if you look at from its inception in 55 BC, whether you had the Gallic Wars, yeah, up until the time of the Prophet, we're talking about what? We're talking about hundreds of years of world domination. The Roman Empire was a serious empire. Then you had the Persian Empire, which once again millennia was dominating the world. So you have these two empires which are established for centuries and millennia, that these people now, who are not even they're thousands of people, like probably maximum 10,000 in population, they're saying we're going to conquer these places. That is astonishing.
For the invasion,
Yeah.
For the invasion, you are mentioning invasion. The invasion was to break the siege on the normal people. For example, Damascus or these cities, those people are not freedom to follow any religion. They have the invasion who talk about is just to break the army or the country or the government.
He's saying
to rule the people.
Like the tribes.
What?
The tribes?
No, that's Roman.
Okay.
Roman.
Yeah, he's trying to say that people are not being compelled.
Then you give freedom of religion for them. The invasion concept is not exactly clear as it's in the history.
Right.
It was just to break the army, then give the people the freedom to religion.
It's
okay to not join Islam. It's not by some people said that Islam spread by sword. No, you have to break the acid. Bilad Faris, this Kisra, this Iran areas, this area. You need to break the army. Then give the people the freedom of that. Because if we come back to different story after Islam even, there was a Safawi who ruled Iran area. That guy, the Iran area was Sunni people. And he killed around 1 million people to force them to join Shia. because he want that for his rules, because he want to rule the area. And one sheikh told him, you have to go with al-imam al-faqih, la la la. Then you need to force the people to join a Shia. They want Sunnah, then go to a Shia.
This is a good point.
So the sword sometimes not to force you to Islam, no, to remove the force on you and give you the freedom of
And that's what the Prophet said. He said, the Prophet ﷺ, he said to the people of Mecca, he said, دعني بيني وبين سائر الناس. He said, just leave me. This was the first thing he said. He said that, or كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said that, leave me between me and the people. So his intention was not to go and force them, because the Quran says, لا إكراه في الدين, there's no compulsion in religion. And that's why you, لا إكراه في الدين. There's no compulsion in religion. لا إكراه means no compulsion, you can't force somebody.
No enforcement.
Yeah. And that's why, in fact, when Islam did conquer these lands, and it was a conquest, when they conquered these lands, which would have otherwise conquered them, by the way, because the Roman Empire was no pacifist state, and neither was the Persian Empire. But when it did conquer those lands, as the brother mentioned, it gave freedom of religion to the people there.